everyone, welcome back to another episode of Flutter Original Series. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the packages together with the author of the package, MobX, to handle my applications state management. So I'm very excited to have Pavan today with me because he has one of the Flutter favorite packages, as well as one of the best state management packages, which I already used. But today, we're going to pair program together, and he helps me to get the best out of this package in my application. And let's welcome Pavan. Hi.
Hey, hello, Majid. Thanks for having
How's
me.
it? No problem. It's a pleasure to have you in this show. Let's first of all, let's start with introducing yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Pavan Pudila, and so I work as the head of architecture at a company called Tara Digital, which is not recently, maybe about 2 years back, subsidiary of the large Tata group of companies, and where I lead, architecture, engineering, and a few other things, around various aspects of the e-commerce ecosystem. So in my free time, I also do a lot of open source work, and MobX has been one of the more popular open source projects which I've been working with for the past, I think, 3 years now. I started work on it about in October of 2018 and published the first version in like Jan 2019, I guess. And since then, it's been a pretty good ride, trying to develop it and making it at par with the MobX JS project, the JavaScript version of MobX. That's where the inspiration came from. And I took a lot of help from the original creator of MobX, Michael Westrate. And so it's been a good learning experience for me, building this package, learning about Flutter, Dart, and I think it's overall I enjoyed it a lot.
That's very nice. So, Pavan, you're doing MobX, and I think MobX was also very popular in JavaScript world, right? Am I right?
Yep.
So, tell me a little bit about your motivation, why you chose MobX, and then you try to do it in Dart, and everything around it. Tell us the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I apparently didn't know about MobX for a very long time. So I stumbled upon it when I was building my React application way back in 2015, I think. And at the time, there were very few state management solutions. Redux was obviously there. And I tried using Redux because we were a team of about 12, 15 people. And so we were using a state management solution using the standard React, regular context, regular Flux-based architecture to build our state. And then, of course, we naturally graduated to Redux, and I realized that over time, within I think a month or so, we realized that Redux had a lot of problems in terms of the files and in terms of the amount of wiring that you have to do with like action creators and actions and dispatchers and all kinds of things, right? I mean, and middlewares and stuff. And it just felt like a lot of moving pieces just to put the UI and the model together. And so that's when we were searching for something else. What else is there in the market to see and do with state management? And at that time, we stumbled upon MobX, and we played with it for about a week or so. In I think around mid of 2015, and we implemented one of the business use cases using MobX JavaScript. At the time, I think it was very early version, so maybe 3.0 or something at the time. And we found it to be pretty liberating, frankly speaking, because we didn't have all the extra boilerplate code of writing your actions and dispatchers and middlewares and stuff. It was a very simple experience of creating a class, attaching a few decorators to some fields called observables, and then simply using it as an observer inside your React code. And you make a change to the observable in your store, and automatically the UI updates itself, right? There's no extra wiring that you have to do in terms of subscribing to things or firing notifications from the model and so on and so forth. And there were lots of additional abstractions, built into MobX for handling, side effects and logic and things like that, right? And it just felt like a very simple approach to managing state in a large application. And at the time, we were building a pretty large portfolio application for, investors and trading and financial analytics and all that. And the amount of state we were managing was quite a bit. There was also a lot of interdependency between various features, and all of that just became much more simpler to manage with MobX. And so that's been a motivation. And I also contributed to MobX for some time. Then I wrote a book with the author of MobX JavaScript on MobX itself, which is probably the only book on MobX right now in the market. So when I came to Flutter, it was a natural thing for me to see, hey, is there MobX in Flutter? And there was, I think, some attempt at doing it, but it was pretty abandoned, at the time. There was nobody actually really working on it. So I decided to kind of pick it up. So instead of learning Flutter, I decided to first build MobX Dart, which was not available at the time. And I just threw out a tweet at the time, about, hey, can I build this thing in MobX Dart and see how it works out? And people were saying, yeah, let's do it. And so I spoke to the creator, Mikhail, and said, can you help me out just understanding the internals of MobX? And he very graciously spent a weekend with me, and we walked over the code and a lot of other things in JavaScript. And some of the things which you do and you kind of take for granted in JavaScript, like dynamic programming and automatic typing and doing decorators with Babel and stuff like that, are not available in Dart, right? It's all a statically typed language, so you have to do things differently over here. So I discovered CodeGen, and then I discovered a few other things with Dart on how to do it, and retrofitting, not retrofitting, but fitting the MobX style of working into Dart, right? And all the aesthetics that you get in MobX JavaScript, I had to fit it into Dart. And that was quite an exercise, just trying to figure out, what makes sense, how will it be useful, and whether it will be really useful from a developer point of view, what will be the developer experience of building something like this, and so on. And it took me like maybe 2 months to kind of really figure it out. And I had some help from open source folks out there, because I just put it online on GitHub. And then somebody came along and said, you should use CodeGen. And then he wrote the first version of the CodeGen. And then it said like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Open source really works, when you put it out into the open. And I got a lot of help from folks who were already experts in Dart and Flutter, and they guided me along. And I think that's when it became like a more mature project over time.
Yeah.
And within, I think, few months, it was already being adopted by a few folks, and people were building their businesses and startups using MobX. And then I think it became sort of favorite also over time. So a lot of things happened, I think, naturally, organically, maybe over a few months.
All right. Actually, very good. So I recently had a talk about state management. You know that in many communities, state management is very controversial topic, right? Everyone
Yes.
likes their own package. We have multiple different packages or ways of managing a state. And I recently had a talk about the state management, and from an architect perspective, like how you should choose in a state management. And of course, after evaluating some packages, and for my application in that talk, MobX was one of them, and I categorized the state management, and MobX, to my opinion, falls into the reactive programming category somehow. You're having observables, the concept of streams, and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to explain a little bit about the concept only, or if you have anything to show us, also you can maybe show us. So we want to know, when you say MobX, from the architect perspective of it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
What kind of feature MobX has, or what kind of core concept that we need to learn, and then what are the optional concept that we need to learn? For example, you said side effect. I assume that side effect is kind of like an optional one, right? So maybe it's a
Mm-hmm.
core concept. You can explain a little bit more about it.
Sure, sure. So there's actually a nice diagram on the MobX Dart webpage. So if you open up MobX Dart netlify.app and go to these core concepts on the left-hand side, yeah. So this diagram kind of summarizes everything about MobX in just one place, right? So at the heart of MobX are three fundamental concepts, which are observables, actions, and reactions, right? So observables carry the core state of your application, and you can think of it as your reactive state, right? And by reactive, I mean whenever the thing changes, it automatically notifies to whoever is listening to that particular state, right? So that's what reactive really means. So observables carry the core state of your application. And Reactions listen to the changes on observables, right? So that's where the notification happens. So whenever observables change, they notify the reactions, and the reactions will obviously, identify the fact that okay, something has changed. Maybe I need to now, fire off a network call, or maybe I need to re-render the UI. So all of this can be captured as a reaction, right? So literally, when a data changes, your UI has to change. So UI is literally a reaction to the change in data, which is
Mhm.
observables, right? So think of it as that way. Now, of course, just having the notification and listening to notifications is not enough, right? You also need to allow the user to take action on these things, and that's where actions come in. So this is where the user comes in and you make it a user interface, right? So actions, they mutate the observables. Because ultimately the role of a user is to do some task, run through some workflows, make some changes, do some CRUD and things like that. And this is where the actions would come in. They will mutate the observables. Observables will in turn notify the reactions. Reactions will go about doing their own thing. So reactions can sometimes also fire their own actions. So for example, let's say you clicked on a button, right? So that's where an action happened. The button get notifies to the store and says, you know what, hey, somebody clicked a button. So let me go and fire a network call and fetch something from the server. And so you run some background process to fetch the thing. And when the data arrives, the reactions get notified, okay, the data has changed because the observable has changed, right? The core state has changed because of the server payload. So reactions say, you know what, oh, the network call has come in. So now I need to render the UI, and the UI automatically changes itself to the fact that you clicked on a button. So all of this is captured in this loop that you see over here, right? This is a loop between observables, reactions, and actions. And the only way you can get out of the loop is when reactions actually call the side effects,
Mhm.
right? So side effects are just changes happening externally outside of the loop, and that is how you do things like UI re-renders and network calls and those kind of things. And sometimes those side effects can also actually call the actions and make changes to
Mhm.
observables. So there's one more arrow kind of which needs to go from side effects into actions, right? So
Mhm.
that can happen too. So all of this is the core concepts of reactive state management in MobX, and this diagram kind of summarizes it nicely.
That's very nice. Actually, it resemble if anyone here, like I know you're watching, if you have done Angular and probably used NGRX, it's very similar to NGRX architecture somehow. It's an like a Redux concept, so but a little bit modified. So you have like an observable, you have reaction, and then you have action, and then you have side effect. And actually, the concept of side effect is very very powerful. As you said, you can compose several different actions into a sequence of things that can happen right after each other. So I
Yep.
really like that idea. But
Yeah.
this diagram also resembles somehow block architecture. So it's very similar, isn't it? But different naming for sure. But to me, it's resembling block pattern a little bit. Can you explain on that
Yep.
as well?
Absolutely. So, although I explained to you the three concepts of the MobX, right? Your observables, actions, and reactions, there's one fundamental thing which kind of differentiates MobX from every other state management library out here. And that difference is the fact that you don't have to manually wire anything. There is no need to manually fire any notification. There is no need to manually subscribe to any notification, right? It all
Hmm.
happens behind the scenes for you automatically. And that is where the transparency of MobX comes into picture, right? So every reactive system, relies on the fact that there is a notification going out and somebody has to subscribe to those notifications to make changes on their side. But in most systems, you have to do this manually. You have to manually say notify listeners. You have to manually say subscribe to something or listen or watch on something, right? And this has to be done at every place there is a notification going out, and every place there is a watch or a subscription happening. And subscriptions normally happen in the UI through observer widgets and things like that. And notifications happen inside a store where whenever you set a property or you make a change, you'll say notify listeners so that it goes out, right? And this is the place where MobX differentiates itself fundamentally, where you don't really have to fire any notification or subscribe to anything. All you do is just read the observable inside your observer, and the fact that you're reading is enough of a hint to MobX that something is being read, So this particular variable is reactive now. So anytime it changes, I need to notify the guy who is reading it, right? So this happens behind the scenes transparently, and that is why you never see any notification, any subscription whatsoever inside MobX codebase. So although yes, it looks very similar to Redux and Block and I'm sure other reactive systems, what differentiates is the fact that there is no manual wiring of these things.
I see. That's cool. Then I think it's time to get into the practical part of it. So now we
Yeah.
can start pair programming, and you can show us how we can use MobX in an application and how transparent it is. You made some promises right now. Let's see. All
Yes.
right. As always, you can jump into my VS Code and my sample application, my application that I built for training, talks, and different purposes, my MJ Coffee app. I pair program on this application with many other authors. I already implemented several different packages with different authors, but never implemented any state management as of now. So I'm using built-in features in Flutter completely. So I don't have any
Okay.
package for state management. So MobX is going to be my first state management package to try out in MJ Coffee app. So,
Okay, cool.
So I can actually explain quickly what I am thinking about the scenario that we can do in state management. So for this short time that we have. So usually in many applications, having a login, logout, and authenticated screens and things like that is very common. And usually we have an app state where we want to share across different widgets and maybe all widgets. And authentication is probably one of them. So probably it's a very good use case. So I'm going to have an application that has a sign in, sign up. We're going to implement sign in for now. So at the moment, it's just a simple redirect. I redirect to my menu screen, but this screen must be protected. So I want this button somehow to call a HTTP client, make sure that user is authenticated, and then redirect to this screen. And then I also want to see the name of person in my profile screen. So it's another screen. So that's an app state. So I can use the profile name everywhere in my application. But I particularly want to add it to my profile screen. And then I have a logout button if we get time. So I hope that we can also implement another the other way around. So instead of login out, like calling an HTTP, cleaning up, and then redirect back to the home screen. This is the scenario that I want to have a MobX and a global app state for my authentication object. Okay, Pavan. So now I'm going to explain to you. So I have a screen folder where you can see home and profile. Actually, these are the main screens that we're going to deal with at the moment. So home screen, if I navigate down my home screen, so you will see that somewhere here I have a button and it says here if user is logged in, so perhaps we can also do something here, doesn't matter, but this button, you see that it's sign in, sign up, and we want to implement this logic somewhere here. So and this context go name menu, going to the menu screen, I want this to be somehow triggered when user is authenticated, right? So this is a place that we want to work together, perhaps, and I see you are already there. And then another one is profile screen. So if I navigate down, you'll see somewhere I said text widget says hello Majid. I just want to rename this to my profile something, profile name, for example.
Yep.
That is going to be our use case. And I have a bunch of other things if you want to know, but I think we can get started without interfering those. For example, I have already an authentication service, so which we can probably just mock a login, like calling that in other layer if you want. But just to give you a heads up, doesn't matter. I think I'm gonna leave this right now to you to see what what is the best way of doing this scenario with MobX? Tell
Okay,
us.
sure. So generally, the way you should think about state management is that you capture the operations and the state in one class,
Yeah.
right? So that's where you kind of do all the operations and keep it together. And so when you start out with MobX, generally you think about what is the state that I need to show across the UI, and what are the operations I need to perform to fetch the state and also manipulate the state, right? So I would normally start out with a class, and I think you have models here. Can I use that?
Yeah.
Let me
Just
just
go for
see.
it.
Okay, so you have a coffee class. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll create something separate so that you can actually see it side by side with your existing state. So I'll create a
Yeah.
new file inside MobX, sorry, models, and let's just call it, let's say, coffee store, just to kind of keep it very
Hmm.
obvious, right? And so in MobX, before you, of course, you start using MobX, you have to install it. So I'm not sure if the pub spec already has it or not. Let's just
I
quickly
don't
check
think we
that.
have it, so we can install it actually. Let me just add
Yeah,
it. Both
yeah.
MobX
So,
and MobX for Flutter, right?
yep, you could add both of them, yes.
Nothing else? That's fine.
Yeah, that should be good enough, yep.
Okay, good.
Right, and I will start with the simplest approach to using MobX. Okay, so I guess you need to run pubget, I guess.
Okay, it's already done.
Oh, cool, awesome. So let me go back to the store then. So the first thing we do is let's just create a class, right? Because everything in
Yeah.
Dart and in MobX too, we should be keeping it together. So let's just call it a coffee store, right? And then
Yeah.
let's just think about what you would put over here. And I think you're going to sign into something, and then you will have a user, right?
Yeah.
Who will have its name, his or her name shown over there. So I could just
Exactly.
say, so let's just call it user,
Yeah.
and let's just call it user over here. And then obviously the user class is missing. So let's just create the user class and put the name for the user, right? And this could have other things also in the future. We could add like IDs
Yeah,
and
just let's have it named simple.
more details. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'm putting it optional because initially the user could be empty, right? So you know that it's a logged out user or anonymous user at this point,
Yeah.
right? And now the thing is that this, by definition and by its own, is not reactive. As
Hmm.
in, the user doesn't notify anybody else in the world that I'm changing, right? So whenever the user variable changes, there's nobody in the world who could come to know that this thing has changed. So to make it a reactive state, I'll have to make it an observable,
I
right?
see.
And so I can make it an observable with null because
Hmm.
by default the user doesn't have any value, right? I'm not sure. Oh, the observable needs to be imported. So let's get that.
Actually, I can import it
So
quickly. Just let me. Yeah,
yeah, that's
I
it.
import.
That's it. Yeah. All right. So now we have observable. So observable is one of the core elements of MobX, right, which you saw in the diagram as well. So now you have the observable. I'm not sure why it stays quickly. Oh yeah. So this guy has to be a final,
Yeah.
and we need to create a user constructor, and let's just call it. Right.
Yeah.
So let's just make it this way, and then why is this squiggly? Let's just figure out now. Not
Oh,
sure
so
about that.
because this must be observable user now,
Aha, yes. So we can just call it, yeah, final of that.
or we can just simply say this. I mean,
Exactly, yeah. So this
we can
keeps it
use.
simple. Yeah. So this will keep it simple now. And now the coffee, we are creating this into a final variable because what you really want to manipulate is the user.value and
Yeah.
not user itself, right? The user.value actually contains your user instance, right? So this is the state of your application. So now
Okay.
we have
So wait a
captured the
minute.
state.
Here I have a question here. So if then later, let's say I have another something here. Let's say I don't know number of
Mhm.
coffees. And if I want to change this, then it should not be final because I want to change the value of this, right?
Well, the way you
So
would do it is you will create an observable. Yes, exactly. You will create an observable of final. So let me just add that over here. So you will create, say, a number of coffees, if I spelled it correctly, right? It's going to be an observable
yeah,
of 0 because initially you would have 0 probably,
yeah, you're right.
right? So this way, whenever you want to change things, and you would say number of coffees dot value equal to +1, +2, whatever you want to do, wherever you're adding, consuming coffees, right?
Exactly.
So this now becomes your state of your application. So this whole thing that we just typed over here is the state of your application,
I see.
right? So I'll just put it over here.
But then here I have another question. So we have a coffee store. That means we are holding everything into one store, all the states
Mm-hmm.
across up. Can I have like a store per each screen as well? For example, if I have some kind of state that is sharing across 3 widgets, I don't want to create it
Mm-hmm.
in the global
Yep,
store. So then can I do that as well, right? So create
absolutely,
several. Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So normally what you would do is you would have the root store, which contains, all the feature stores, right? So think of your app being divided into a collection of features, and each feature could have its own store, right? Because
Absolutely.
the feature could have very specific store and state you're going to maintain per store. And so you could do that. And these feature stores need not even be part of a root store. They could all be independent stores,
Ah, that's
and
good.
you could create their instances separately using Provider or Riverpod or whatever, right? And then spread it across your entire application.
So isn't it
So
better now we rename this coffee store to coffee global store or like root store, for example?
yep, not a bad idea at all. So we can just call it Coffee Root Store. And normally what I do is I don't call it a root store. I call it something like the Coffee App Store,
Yeah,
right? So just to
exactly.
kind of
That's
make
an
it
app
very
store.
obvious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's at the application level. You could call it root as well, but app kind of because it's all an application, right?
yeah,
So it
yeah.
kind of
That makes sense. That makes
sounds
sense.
sounds a little nicer also. But yeah, you're free to call it root or an app store just to kind of demarcate the fact that this is the top level store. Now, this is one aspect. So in our case, things are very simple, so we're just keeping it together. But if you had a more complex application, let's say the Coffee App Store itself has an authentication store, right? So you can actually keep the user information inside the auth store rather than
Mhm.
in the Coffee App Store. And then the auth store could be an instance inside your Coffee App Store,
Mhm.
right? So you could do it that way as well. So we could just do a quick renaming and refactoring here itself. So let's just do that. So I don't know if I can copy and then paste it here. So we can just call it the auth store, and then this could have your actual user information,
Yeah,
right? And then here, instead of having a user, you would have the auth, and this won't be an observable anymore. This will just be a auth store,
yeah.
and you would create an instance and keep it ready over here itself,
I think I
right?
like this
So
better. It's even easier to maintain and manage it somehow.
yeah, yeah. So as you have more features, you can keep accumulating the features in your Coffee App Store, or if they're so independent, you could just keep it, at the root level itself. So you could have
Yeah.
multiple root level stores. Nothing is prohibiting you from doing that, right? So that's good. So this is one aspect of the auth store. Now, since
Mhm.
the authentication itself is not just about the state, but also the operations, right? So we could keep the operations also over here. So let's create let's say a login operation, right? And this normally would be async, right? Because login would have to contact something and then get its value. And so we could simulate it. So we can say await for future dot I think delayed.
Yeah,
I need my auto completion right now.
that is correct.
Duration seconds 0. Okay, so we could do that. So I'm just simulating it, So let's just put 200 milliseconds.
It's
Okay.
200 seconds. We can
Oh,
say
sorry. Yeah,
two
sorry. 2
two
seconds. 2 seconds.
seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the simulation of the network call. And then here I would say user equal to a user based on the payload that I get back from the login API, right?
Exactly.
So we could actually do that by creating a separate service method at a service class. I think you have one called auth service over here,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if you have a login. So we
And we
could do
don't
that over here.
we don't have, but I think it's fine. So we can skip
Okay.
that part because here I think the concept is to call an HTTP, let's say, or from a service layer, and then get
Yep.
the user object serialized, deserialized, whatever we want to do, and then return the user or assign this user to this user object, right?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah. So what you would get back is normally not a user object, right? Because
Yeah,
the network call would not know about users and stuff. So maybe
yeah,
you get back, let's say just a string for now,
yeah,
right? So this would be a string, and then you would create a new user object with the name being, say, Majid,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I'm assuming that.
Let's
Now,
actually call
obviously,
it Majid
yeah.
and Pawan. So because then when we
Okay.
change it to profile, then it's easier to recognize. Go ahead.
Sure, sure. So now notice that, I can obviously assign it to user, right? It has to be to user dot value, right?
Hmm.
So this is the how whenever you assign something, the notification goes out internally, and then automatically the observer comes to know about it. So this is basic login right now. Excuse me. Right. So I think you do your login, and then you would have this ready. Now, typically in MobX, you don't assign variables, stray variables like this. So what you would normally also do is you would put this into a run in action,
I see. And
right?
can you explain
Just to
what
kind
is
of,
run in action?
yeah. So see, MobX has this thing that if you assign variables directly, right? So it is not very clean because there's also something called a spine that can happen inside MobX, which will tell you, okay, whenever you're assigning something to a variable, and it can give you a debug log of all the spies, of all the things, all the operations that are happening internally to MobX. So one of the recommendations which came from the MobX JavaScript world is to be very strict about assignment, right? So rather than assigning variables all over the place and creating a litter of assignments and mutations, you capture your mutations inside actions, right? So this kind of keeps it compartmentalized, and you also identify why you are assigning something to a observable state, right? So here we know that for a fact that I'm changing the user. So I could actually call this action and say I'm assigning something to the user. So when you get a debug log of all the changes, you could see, okay, my user got assigned, right, as part of a log statement. So you could typically put that in run in action, right? So for now, we can skip this, but it'd be advisable to kind of use this wherever you are assigning something. So for now, I'll just put this over here. This just makes it clean and one of the best practices for using MobX.
That's good.
All right, so just you do this. So at this point, we have a login taken care, and on the same token, we can actually write the logout also, right? So I can just put this over here. And logout also is going to be a async operation. So the only thing different over here is that the value becomes null,
Hmm.
right? And obviously, we can do other things also when these things change. So this takes care of your store, right? You have a basic state which you're manipulating using login and logout methods. Now we need to obviously make changes to the UI, right? And that's where
Yeah,
the observer side of things comes into picture. So let's just go back to your home, was it? Or where was it?
yeah. Home screen.
Yeah. So in home screen, when you press the login button, so right now you're going straight into go named, right? So
Yes.
you're jumping straight into the route right away. And what we want to do is we want to call our login method, right?
Yeah.
So I would say await on my login method, right? So which is the store itself, and the store hasn't been created. So one way to create the store would be to put it as a global variable, right? So you
Hmm.
could go into, oops, sorry, let's say the app method, or where is your top level thing?
It's main
Main.dart.
probably.
Yep. Yeah. So you could actually put something over here itself. So I can say final store equal to new coffee store or coffee store. But instead, what I'll do is I'll put the instance of the store also in the coffee store class so that we know that this is the final one, right? So
Wait a
I'll
second.
create,
Where did you create the global object in the
so
main dot dart?
no, I didn't create over there. So I'm creating it over here in my coffee store.
In coffee store, you're there.
Yeah. So I'm just calling
You're
it,
creating here. Hmm.
yeah, I'm creating it over here. So let's just call it coffee store equal to coffee app store.
I see.
Right, so I just create an instance over here. So now I can import it from one place. And this is also useful because when you're doing unit testing, you don't want to deal with UI. You want to deal with pure state classes and state files, right? So this way, everything stays together and you don't have to import or do anything special when you're doing unit
Hmm.
testing, right? So it just keeps it clean. And one other way to create this store would be to use a provider, right? So you would wrap your main app with your provider and
Yeah,
set the
sure.
value to an instance of the Coffee App Store. That's one more way to do it. But for things to just to keep it simple, we'll do it this way. So let's go back to
Or
your
maybe I
home
can
store.
add one more thing. If some people like provider is one way of doing that, there is another way. Like if someone is using because getx, sorry, not getx, get it,
Yep.
the service locator package is also very popular by Thomas, right? So many people like to have that service locator, and maybe here is the place that they can put this object over there, and then the get it service locator can help them to retrieve this object or
Yep.
this
Yep.
value actually.
So any
Good.
dependency management framework could be used to, kind of inject
Yeah,
values. So
yeah.
it need not be
That's good.
created directly the way I'm doing it here, right? So now you can actually do your async await right over here. So I won't actually await on anything, right? What I can do instead is I know for a fact that when I pressed so I'm going to just comment this out so I don't do any transitions now. And what I'll do here is now I know that I have access to my store, so which is coffee store. And does VS Code do auto completion, like auto
Yeah, yeah, it
imports and
does.
stuff? Yeah.
I can
All right.
help you to do
So,
that. Here we go. It's
okay.
already imported.
Okay, great. So coffee store dot login. Right. So I'm just doing that over here. And notice that
I
I'm not
think
really awaiting.
okay, there is I think a problem here because Coffee Store does not have login. Actually, coffeestore.auth
Aha.
login.
Yep. Yep. Thanks for catching that. That's the best part of paid programming, right?
Yeah, here you go.
The other guy knows what you're doing wrong. So, right. So since we have put everything in the auth store, yes, you would do coffee store.auth.login. And notice that I'm not awaiting anything over here. I'm not taking any action when
Yeah.
the login completes, right? So I'm leaving it separately. And what I want to do is whenever the login completes, I know for a fact that my user is going to change, right?
Hmm.
So I can do my transition when the user changes.
Yeah.
And to make sure I do that, I can come back to my init state. And here is where I can actually set up a reaction, right? So I know that I want to listen to my reaction. I will create a new
Where
reaction and
where do you want to do that? Sorry, here in the initial state in the main class. Okay.
yes, in the init state. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up a reaction. And what reaction is, it basically listens to the state of your current store, right? And whenever the things change, it'll do whatever logic or side effect you want to do inside it, right? So I can now get my reaction. So I can take this guy and say, so reaction takes two parameters. The first parameter is what are you really listening to, or what do you want to react on, right? So I want to react on my coffee store.auth.user because that's the observable, right? And I want to react on its value. And whenever that changes, I'm going to run some effect or a side effect, right? So this time it's going to be a user value because that's what comes back, right, as part of that. And this, I think, takes the reaction itself, and I'm going to just ignore that for now. So here I can check. So if user is not equal to null, because login could be failed, right? It could fail for whatever reasons. The network call could have failed. But if the user is not null, I know for a fact that my user actually has changed, and now I can do my transition, right? So here is where I need an access to my Go router. I'm not sure how to do that over here,
We
but
can
I need
probably
access to my,
copy context.go named here go. So probably like
yep,
that.
that's it. Yeah. So this is where I think now I can go into my menu. All right. So I think we're in a state where we can actually test this out. So why don't we jump
Yeah.
to
I think we need to have a hot restart because we changed quite a lot here. So
okay,
let's have a
cool.
hot restart. All right. So let's see. So now I click 2 seconds, and here we go.
Okay,
Then it's working.
cool. So
Perfect.
let's do something. Let's do something more creative now, right? Now, when you
Yep.
clicked on something, you know that you're waiting for a network call. So let's show some
Exactly.
visual feedback to the user that the call is going on,
Absolutely.
right? So what we can do is let's add something else also to this. So when you're in your command button, you say you're on pressed, and is there a way to disable this button now? Can I do something like enable, disable, or on pressed itself is the value, right? So if it's null, I know it becomes disabled, right? So what I can do is I can wrap this whole thing in an observer, okay? And
Yep.
rather than now, but before I go there, I need to introduce some more state into my coffee store. And this is to keep track of the fact that there's a network call going on in the background, right? So what I can
Like
do
a
is,
loading indicator, right?
exactly, like a loading indicator. So what I'll do is, let's create a observable future, because that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're observing the future value of something. So let's create a loader, right? And that's the auth loader. And this would be my observable future, which initially, of course, will be dot off, and I need future dot value, which is null right now, right? And why is it complaining? Let's just see. So observable value will be of user.
Is it user
Okay,
or loader is some kind of like
let's
boolean?
say, well, we could keep it as a boolean. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's just keep it simple, right? What I can do is I can make it an observable and then simply make it false for now, right? So I can just call it pending.
Yeah. Since you showed us observable future, so can you tell us like the difference between observable and observable future?
Yeah, so what an observable future does is essentially a wrapper around the future itself, right?
Hmm.
So future by default doesn't notify anything unless you put it inside a future notifier or a future reader of some kind, right? What observable future does is allows you to use future inside the MobX system. So you can actually just listen to the observable future status values and things like that to make changes and make show visual feedback and stuff to the UI.
Hmm.
So think of the observable future as just being the future, but more reactive,
Yep.
right? So let's just keep it simple. We can probably get back to that if more time permits. As you can tell, I'm not a VS Code user, so slightly going out of my comfort zone here. All right, so let's just keep a pending variable which has initially an observable state of false. And whenever login happens or logout happens, we could set the pending to true. So I could say pending dot value equal to true, and I can do the same thing with running action, but for now I'll just let's just put it. Why skip it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So let's not bypass the good practices, and let's just keep it simple. So pending dot value equal to true. Right. So that is what we're doing. And okay. Why is this complaining? Oh, not really. All right. So we can take this whole line. And when this completes, obviously we'll say pending dot value equal to false.
Hmm.
So now the interesting thing about pending is that initially when you start your UI, pending will be false, right? So I can't really disable my button immediately, right? So I'll have to have a third state for pending. So rather than having a third state with a nullable, what I could do is I could just capture the future status, right? And then put that over here. So rather than pending being just an observable of false, I can just make it a future status dot, what is there? Um, I can start with fulfilled. Oops, I don't know what happened there. Oops, I don't know, some things. All right. But even fulfilled is not a good value, right? Because obviously I haven't even made the call, so how can I be fulfilled? And pending is not the right call because I haven't even started the operation. And rejected also is not the right call. So what I need is something like none, right? Which tells me that there is nothing happening at this state. So since I don't have a good way of representing that, I'll create a separate enum for it, right? So I'll just call it loader state. And initially it will be none. And eventually it becomes pending, and then it can be completed and it also be rejected, right? So these are all the possible values that you can get for your enum. And so now I can keep my initial value to be loader state dot none, which is more logical also, right? Because that's exactly what I'm doing. And then when the pending changes, then I can make it loader state dot pending, because that's when I'm actually starting the operation. And when I complete the operation, I can say loader state dot completed. Now, if for whatever reason this particular call fails, right? So you could put the whole thing inside a try catch and then also catch the error state, right? So that's one way to do it. In fact, we should just do it right now too, right? You could have a try in which you would catch the thing, right? So I forgot the syntax though. So catch, I'm not catching anything right now. Let's just take this whole guy, put it over here, and this whole thing happens when you succeed. And here is where I can put my user.value again becomes null, right? Because I just want to make sure, I'm not ever in a state where I have like bad values. And then now this could be rejected, right? So this is one way to kind of neatly capture the true and false states, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So we
it's
have
actually,
this login.
let's have some reflection here. It's actually very nice here. So based on the loader state enum that you created, so now the UI can react based on those values. The none is none, nothing. So pending maybe a loading, and then completed the action that you want to do, and the rejected maybe it's a UI like showing some kind of button, a snack bar or a button, a
Yep,
snack bar or something like to show some errors.
exactly,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
very good.
So you could react to all those different states now and make those changes like showing a snack bar and transitioning and things like that. So we'll get to that right away now, right? So this is login, and you could do the same thing for logout also. So I won't repeat the code here, right?
Yeah,
So let's go back to our profile screen, not profile, sorry, our home screen,
home screen.
right? So right now the button is kind of not very intelligent, right? It doesn't know what's happening in the background. So what we could do is anytime you press the button, we could disable the button, right? So
Yeah,
to
but
do that,
wait a second
all right, all
here.
right.
So if you look at this, there is a little bit of logic here. Look at this here. It says if busy, it's actually that pending state. So
Aha.
what I was managing that kind of locally in the widget. So and then I'm gonna showing some kind of like indicator, and then we have if user is not logged in, and this one, and then here is like maybe welcome name. Maybe we can refactor this right
Yep,
now, the whole thing, and then replace it with like a proper state management. Let's go
absolutely.
for it.
Absolutely. So what we can do is we can take this whole row, which I think is still here, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I can move it out to a separate component. That's what we can just make it clean, right? So I don't know if there's a way to right click and say
I can do
extract from
that for
component.
you. Let me see.
Yeah.
But there is also one more thing here. Error is not empty. We show also an error. This is all about like the states, right? So now I think we don't even need this because we have like the rejected state, so we can. So I think
Yep.
what I'm gonna do here. So let's do that. I'm gonna actually create a widget out of it. I move it like wrap with not wrap, so like
Yeah. Just a
X
regular
X.
stateless widget is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, let's call it logging button.
Yep. That works.
And here we go. So now we have login button, and then we have this widget. Everything is moved here.
Okay, so a lot of the stuff we actually don't need, so
No.
I can just take it out for now, right? So this whole stuff, right? I can just take it out, keep it very simple,
Yeah.
and I can take this out from here as well, and clear this out. So now, instead of just a row, what we will do is we will return an observer. An observer actually comes from the Flutter MobX package.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you're saying something, Majid?
Yeah, I can probably wrap it easier with here. So I can say wrap it with...
something which has a builder in it, you know. So,
yeah. Oh, you want a builder?
Yeah.
Okay, wrap it with builder.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. Yeah. So now instead
So then
of builder,
it's
I can
going to
just call
be
it observer.
all right. Here you go.
Yeah, observer.
Observer. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And this comes from the Flutter MobX package.
Yeah. That's good.
Perfect. Awesome. So we have the observer now. So now what you can do inside the builder is read your state, right? So the core state that we're reading right now is the login status. So let's just call it final login state equal to coffee store dot auth dot have I exposed it pending. What am I calling it? Loader state.
I think it was no. I think let me help
go back
you
to
here.
that.
No, we have. I think it's pending. You're right.
Okay, so pending is not really a good name. So what I'll do is I'll just call it state. I just do a rename here and automatically renames over there.
I can refactor it. Let me just refactor it then. Let's call it logging.
Login state. Yeah, that's good.
Or loader state. I think it's better. Oh well, login state doesn't matter. Naming is a hard problem in computer science, right?
But if you get the right names, you know, you can sleep peacefully and come back to code that you can actually understand the next day.
Sure. Okay, now it's refactored.
All right, cool. So thanks for that. So now I have the login state, right? So I need to do something with the login state. So what I can do is, if my login state is pending, which is loader state dot pending.
I can obviously say you're doing JavaScript a lot in your daily work.
Oh,
because you do triple. That's
you caught me there.
There you go.
I'll tell you something, Majid. I keep switching between so many languages, right? So I write JavaScript.
I have the same problem.
I write Dart, and sometimes I do Kotlin and Rust. So I'm like, mind is exploding each time when I'm switching between languages.
Yeah, I have the same problem. I completely understand you.
Yeah, so this shows all the bad habits which you accumulate when you write so many different languages. Okay, so what we're doing here is when your login state is pending, you show this. Else, if your login state is completed, so we will be very, and this time I'll use two equals. So the state completed. So one other way which we could have done this is to use a switch case, but I think a collection literal is probably nicer over here because you're putting it inside a array, right? So let's just keep it that way. And so we have this, and then when it's completed, you show this. Now, one other thing we could also do is when you are in the pending state, right? You could actually disable this button. So what you could do also over here is login state, equal to loader state dot pending. Then I make it null, and if not, I can then assign a callback to it. So this kind of keeps it, very neat, and you're not allowing the user to like do a rage clicking or something like that. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So this also makes it nicer. And this, I'm not sure. Are you even showing welcome somewhere or?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, here is where you actually completed, like the auth profile is not null anymore. So we're going to say, hey, for example, Majid and Pawan, right? So the profile name.
Yeah.
But I think for this case, we can just ignore this part. So that's fine.
Yep. Yeah. So in that case, what I'll do is I'll also remove this else and just keep it in neat if over here.
Yeah.
Right. And then just add the comma so that, oops, yeah. So now this is very clean, right? If you're pending, then you obviously will show this. If you're in the login state, then you will show this whole button.
Yeah.
And so let's see it now, I guess.
That's good. So first of all, we need to log out. So, and I need to restart, let's say, because we changed again something here. First thing first, I don't see my login. I think the reason I can tell you quickly, because you said when it's completed. So
Yep,
it must be
yep.
when it's probably none, right?
Yes.
So because
None
I want
as
to
well as,
see.
yeah, so as long as the login state is, so it can be with none, but you also want to see the button when it's pending,
Yes.
right? So what you can do is, as long as my login state is,
Well, in this case, actually, in this case, maybe not, because I have a row which is showing either a loading circulate progress indicator
yep, I don't
or
even
a
need it.
button. No, I think
Exactly right.
we don't need that. So
Yep, yep.
if
You can just take
if
out
we
the
are
whole if line, we can just take it out.
exactly.
And this is even cleaner now, right? So there's no need to even have a conditional around this.
Yes. So now I'm gonna restart. Now I see my button, so that's fine.
Okay.
And
So
then
now
if I click, then I cannot click. I can click for sure. Oh, sorry. Let's go back once more. I actually let's have this state if you don't mind. So I want to say if it's none, just show the button. Otherwise, don't show the button. Like I completely remove the button. Even this state that you added, just remove everything.
Oh,
Let's
I know
restart.
the problem. I know the problem. So what I've done over here is the auth.login state is actually an observable, right? So this has to be a value actually.
Ah, here we go. Yeah,
right?
sure.
And so now I think things should be fine. I don't know why it wasn't complaining earlier. So login state are, what do we call it? Login state, right? So let's just go back here quickly. So if you notice, login state is actually an observable, right?
Yeah,
So
here
we
you go.
need to
It's
reference it. We need to reference it using our home. Where is the home page? Right. So now I think it should work.
Yeah, so you just changed it to value and then it's going to work. Let's see. Let's have a hot restart. And then if I click now, then yeah, here we go.
Yep.
It's perfect. This is nice. This is very nice.
Yes, but we lost the button, which we should not have lost. So
yeah, I lost it because I lost it because I deliberately said none. But then from now on, I don't see it. Maybe I can say, as you said previously.
Yeah. So let's just remove this altogether, and let's try hot reload again now. So you should always see a button, and it will become disabled along with the indicator.
Oh, sorry. Yes, let's do that. Then when it's pending, let me just copy that. Let's do that. When it's pending, now let's have it null, and otherwise a callback here.
Perfect. Yep.
Perfect. So then now if I restart, then I'm gonna have this showing a loading. Okay, perfect. And then I see the page. That is perfect. So that means I have my state here and I have my side effect somewhere in here. And so now I have a question here. So the reaction is also doing some kind of side effect, right? So here is the side effect.
Yep.
And can I dispatch an action here? Like, for example, say, because it's very typical, right? So you say now user is authenticated. For example, I have the token, a valid authentication token, so which I can call HTTP request in some servers, right? So now I want to say here, like, go and fetch a list of coffees, for example, another HTTP call, but I need to be logged in first. Is this somewhere that I can do that, right?
Yep. So what you could do is you could actually set that reaction in your store itself, right? So you don't have to do it inside your UI. you could create a reaction. So let's go back to your store for a second, right? So in your constructor, and typically you would not do it in the auth store, right? Because that logic of side effect that you want to invoke is something outside of the auth store itself, right? So let's keep it at the app level, all right?
Yep.
So what I could do here is I'll create my coffee app store constructor, right? And then here what I can do is I can set up a reaction. So normally what I do is I create a separate method called setup reactions, and then I put everything in that, right? So setup reactions. And then here what I can do is create the reaction. And this would do the same thing which you did over there, which is you listen to your auth dot login state dot value, and then whenever that changes, you can look at the state, and then if state is loader state dot completed, you can now fire your network call, right? So this way you can actually run your whole thing. Oops. Okay. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure why
Okay.
it's complaining now. Oh yeah, I need to pass my parameter which I'm ignoring right now, which is the reaction itself. I
I
pass an
see.
instance of a reaction, but you can ignore for the most purposes. Only for very advanced scenarios, you could actually cancel a reaction if you have a previously made reactions and actions and things like that. But don't have to worry about that over here. All right,
I
so
see.
this way you could do things. Now, there are a few other things which you would actually refactor in this code. One is that if you go back to our homepage,
Yeah.
you notice that there is some side effect logic sitting inside the UI, which
Exactly. That was
generally,
my question
eh,
right now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yes. So normally side effect logic should not sit in the UI, right? UI is a very dumb participant in the whole process. It reads the state, renders the state, and that's about it, right? The responsibility should end over there. The fact that you're actually doing more complex intelligence like navigating screens and stuff should happen through some other mechanism. So the way we could do it is we could invoke this from the outside, right, as a side effect, as a UI side effect, which I can add as an extension to my coffee app store.
Mhm.
So to do that, I need access to the context because the context is something that the UI provides. So I need to provide access to context through something else. So one way you could do it is that when you do your login, so wherever we're invoking the login, right? Where was that? I missed it. The login
Yes.
button, where are we clicking
Somewhere
it? Yeah,
down in
login.
the homepage. Yeah.
Right, over here. Right? So what I could do is I can actually pass the context into my login method.
Yeah.
Right? I'm passing a little bit of my UI state back into my store. Right? And that way I don't have to keep my logic in my UI anymore. Right? Everything is now neatly captured inside my store itself. So what I could do
Yeah.
is I can just pass my context, right? Which I'm getting from the outside. And since I'm not passing it right now, I can go into my login, and this is where things can become a little interesting, right? So I'm passing in my context now, right? Now, the fact that you're passing the context is not enough over here because this context has to be utilized through a reaction. So I'll have to keep a variable that will store this context and then use that context, when the reaction fires, right? And then as soon as the reaction fires, I can nullify my context so that I don't actually keep track of it. So what I could do is I can create a separate internal variable. So now that we have passed the context into my store, this context should not be stored forever, right? Because the context keeps changing, right? It's not something that you should keep track of. So what I could do is just for a temporary purposes, I can keep track of my context and I can do it through a build context, which is optional. And let's just call it context, right? And initialize with null because by default, it will always be null. Now,
Yeah.
whenever I get my context in login, I'm going to keep my context and only set it when my thing actually succeeds, right? So I can just call it context equal to, oh, sorry, I'll have to use this dot context equal to context, right? And why is this complaining? Oops, yeah, this cannot be final. I can just
You
remove
don't
that.
need anything actually. Just
Yeah,
remove
I'm
everything.
just going to just remove that. Yep. So now this way you can keep track of context. This generally is not a great practice. And unfortunately, I don't have a better way to do this because to make changes on the UI, you will have to either get the context or the other option is use some kind of a global key, right? So we'll have to put a key on the Go router's navigator or something of that sort and then invoke it through my store. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if it was possible, if that's exposed on the API, but we should ask Chris for that, right? He
Yeah.
will tell us. But for now, let's just get on with this one. So I have my context now, but this alone is not enough. So what I can do is I can create a separate reaction, um, and so I can just call it. Where is my context? What happened to my context? Where is it? Oh, here it is. Right now, I can just expose this context for the. So this thing will be private, right? And then we'll just expose it for the outside world through get context. And right, and this will be your underscore context, which you set over here. Oops, like minds think alike. Yeah. Okay. So now I have access to my
There's a
context, which is
slight
only.
problem. I think the getter must be nullable as well.
Aha. Yes, of course. Pair programming. All right, so now what I can do is I can set up my reaction whenever my login state completes, right, which is exactly what I'm listening to. Instead of making a network call, I can now do my auth dot context because I have it. And since it's optional, I can say, what was it called? I think it was go router or something, right? Where was that?
Yeah, it's
To go
Go
back to my
router,
home,
but yeah,
right? So let's just quickly go there. Where was that?
I think it's Go router dot
Yep.
of
Yeah. Yeah,
context
this one.
dot go
Yeah,
name.
this one. So I'll just take this and just paste it here, right? And I'll do auth dot context dot go name the menu. I guess that should work. It's still
Where did you
complaining.
copy that?
In my coffee app store, right?
Oh,
So if you
in
go to
Coffee App
the,
Store.
yeah,
Oh,
so I
here in
think,
the reaction.
so I need to
Yeah.
import the extension, I guess, from Go router.
Yeah, well, or what you can do instead, you can say like like that here.
Yeah, that also works.
But then here the context is nullable, but
Yeah, so what you can do
it's
is you could just do, if auth dot context is not equal to null,
no, yeah, here you go.
then you can actually force the context,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
There is one slight error here. I think
Okay. We probably have
you
an extra brace, I
you
guess.
have yeah, one
Okay.
less trail braces. I just fixed it.
Okay, cool. So this way now what you've done is you've taken the logic and put it outside over here, right? And this kind of keeps it nicely tucked inside your store now. And so you can go back to
Yeah.
your home page, and where is our home page? Yes, here. And I don't have to do this anymore, right? So I can just get rid of this whole thing. This reaction is going to be invoked from my login,
Okay.
right? And the other thing which I forgot to do is that as soon as my reaction, I fire off my transition, I don't have any need for my context. So I can actually say auth dot clear context or something like that so that I can, get rid of the context also, right? That's just
Yeah.
a handy method to keep in, but for now, we'll just go with it,
Yeah.
right? So you go back to the home page, and then now, if you notice, there is absolutely no state at all in my home screen state. So I can actually make this a stateless widget. There's no
Yeah,
reason to even have
exactly.
any state being carried over here. So I can just get rid of this whole thing. I guess I don't need any of this. I don't need the init state for sure. And I can actually take this whole thing. Do I need this now?
Let me help. I can actually do that. So here it is, and
Yep.
stateless widget.
Yeah, I think you have an extra L after the less.
Yeah,
Stateless.
here you go.
Yep.
And then, well, we don't have anything
You don't need
here.
the don't need the error message also.
Yeah, because yeah, we can react differently here in this widget based on the state. For
Yep. Yep.
example, let's have an example. Though, for example, if state is rejected,
We can
so
just
or
put a text. Actually, we could do it right over here itself, right? We
yeah,
could do
I
it in
think I
the
can say a text error or something. And so
yep,
just
yep,
an example.
yep.
Here we
And
go. So then I refactored everything to one stateless instead of stateful, which is nice, right?
yes, we always want stateless, right? They are the fastest performing widgets, right? And
Exactly.
it's always good to have it. Now, one more nice thing you can see if you go down to your login button is that this text only shows up, right, when your state gets rejected,
Yeah,
right? Which means as soon as you press the button again, let's say it fails and you press the button again, the text automatically disappears because the login state becomes pending.
exactly.
And this neatly goes away, which is exactly what you want as a
Exactly.
user, right? So things happen automatically. There's no extra work that you have to do to kind of clear things, add things, remove things, and so
Exactly.
on, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Nice.
and the logic is very simple too, right? Anybody looking at this could clearly see that, okay, I'm doing something based on state. There is no subscription to any state. There is no reading, writing, notification going on. All I'm really doing is saying what? I'm an observer, which makes sense because I'm the UI, and I'm observing this particular state, and I'm going to react to this state whenever it changes. And the fact that
Mhm.
I'm reacting is something that happens automatically. There's no need for me to subscribe to any changes, right? I'll
Yeah,
automatically inform you and you react and everything automatically works, right?
that's
So,
nice.
so let's go back to your hot reload and see if it still
That's
works.
nice. Well, I have one comment here. So, Pavan, as you mentioned, like we're passing context to a method outside of the UI, but it's residing somewhere in our pure Dart logic, right?
Yep,
And
yep,
that means we are now depending on build context, which is very particular to Flutter. So
it's
in
wrong.
some
Yes.
case, yeah, if you want to use this pure Dart one, now it has a dependency, which is Flutter, and we cannot do that, right?
Yep.
So I'm just maybe now requesting a feature from you. So I like the fact that we can do reaction as a function and then do the side effect. But if we can have somehow like an observer as a widget, like a side effect widget instead, which is just listening to some value and then I can react over there. I can still keep my context related logic in that particular widget, and I'm not really worried about that because
Hmm.
that everything is very context oriented. It's very fluttery, right?
Yep, yep. So
So
there's a better way to do this, right? So what you really want to do is not pass any UI into your store or any UI state into your store. So rather than keeping
exactly.
it inside my store itself, I could do things using Dart, and it's already available today through extension methods. So let me just try that out, right? So let's go back to home for a second. And what I can do is the fact that I'm navigating into a screen is currently being pulled out from the home screen, right? So we don't know what exactly happens, and we are kind of distributing the UI logic between the UI and the store, which is obviously not great. So what I could do instead is inside my file, I can create an extension on my the coffee auth store.
Yes.
So this is something that I've been doing, after extension methods got introduced. So here what I can do is I can say navigate to menu, right? And to here I can pass my context. And I'm inside my Flutter file, so there's no reason to kind of leak any UI data into this, right? And yeah, I can put it on auth store too. Yeah, that works too. And
But that was actually
so here,
author store, to be honest.
yeah, I mean, I could
But
do Coffee App Store or Auth Store. I mean, any of them is fine. But
yeah,
let's keep it Auth Store. So, and then what I can do is I can go back into my Coffee App Store, and instead of actually calling it over here, um, let's just try this out and see, right? If state, we can take this for a moment and paste it in my home. I'm just reasoning this out to see if that works now.
yeah.
So I first of all need my store, right? Which is final state is I think we call it login state dot value,
You're right.
right? And then I don't need the context because context is already here. I don't need to check for it. I can get rid of that. Take this out. Okay, so are we good? So what is this complaining on now? Do I need to put void here? I don't know. Not sure.
It
Okay.
says the the declaration navigate to menu isn't referenced.
That's fine. That's fine. We'll get to
That's
that in a
fine.
moment.
Yes.
We'll get to that in
Yes.
a moment. So this is the auth store. Now, the problem is we haven't set up the reaction, right? The reaction is still sitting inside my coffee store. And although I'm kind of capturing the UI logic over here, the reaction logic also has to be kept inside my file, right? So where do I set this up, right? So the reaction needs to be kept somewhere over here too. So what we can do is we can keep the reaction over here and then have the extension be a public extension. And here, instead of calling it with all this crazy context and stuff, I can just do auth.navigate
Yes.
to menu, right? And what we can do is we can take this guy which was sitting in my home page, right? And this whole extension, I can cut it out, right? And create a separate file, and that file should be sitting inside my UI. So let's just call it, create a new file here. Let's call it auth extensions.dart. All right, and then let's just paste it here and just call it navigation. Okay, and then yeah, you'll have to get me all this Flutter imports now.
I
Is there a
can do
shortcut
that
for it?
quickly.
Yeah. Okay, and we need for the Go router too. Yep.
Here you go.
All right. Cool. So what we've done is we have moved out the logic entirely into extension methods, and now my home file, is not having anything of that, and also the reaction is not there anymore, right? So it's
Yeah.
still stateless, and I can now go back to my coffee store, and I can say navigate to menu, but I need to import my file now, right? So how do I get that now?
You mean the extension?
The extension, yeah.
You can
So
we can just say here, like for example, where did you create it? Inside.
it's yeah, it's inside screens.
Here. Okay. That's us.
Auth extensions, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you need
So
to
this
pass
is
you still need to pass the context here in this case.
aha. You're right. So how do we
But
fix that now?
what I actually think right now is you can actually move the whole reaction, to be honest, like to this extension.
Mm-hmm.
And because this extension is just for the Flutter UI states, right? So it's also okay to have the reaction over there.
Yep,
So
absolutely. You could actually set up the reaction over there, but that
yeah,
still
you can
needs
do.
the context, right? So someone has to pass the context now, and we don't have the context over here,
Yeah,
right? So how do we do that? So this is something we'll have to think about and see how do we pass this context into the navigate to menu. Now, although we made this a stateless widget, we probably have to go back to stateful widget just for
yeah,
that.
I see.
Yeah, because
What
I
I was
don't see
actually
a good way to
asking,
do that.
Pawan, what I was actually asking was like, you have a reaction as a function where you need to call it somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping that the reaction maybe can come as a widget where I think Block has similar approach where you can actually listen to some changes via the Block listener. I think that's a Block listener. And
Mm-hmm.
then you kind of react to some kind of change. So
Okay.
I'm just wondering if you have that type of widget in MobX. Like, for example, on top of my whole home screen, I can just say, hey, wrap it with up like MobX listener, whatever it is, and
Mm-hmm.
then react to the change of um, whatever logic we
Yep.
had on this extension, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
then just copy that over there.
Yep.
So you
Yep.
see,
Yep. That's a
that's a
good idea.
reaction.
That's a good idea. We could do something like we don't have it right now in MobX,
Yeah,
but it
that
shouldn't
was
be
my
too hard.
feature request, to be honest.
Actually, we could
So
just build it ourselves over here. It's really not that hard, right? So we could just build it and make a widget, a stateless widget, and then the only parameter to the stateless widget would be a
yeah,
reaction method, right? The challenge is it has to be a stateful widget, so it'll keep the reaction live and dispose itself whenever the widget goes out of scope, right? So
yeah,
yeah, we could do that. Not a bad idea.
yeah.
I'll
So
I'll work on that.
that's very good. So then at least we have one feature that hopefully you can work on it. We don't need to do it right now, but I think this is going to kind of clean the idea of moving context to the store, because I like the store somehow keep it as clean as possible
You're
to the
right.
Dart, logic as possible.
Absolutely.
Because in many cases, actually in my use case a few years ago, we had an application written in Angular Dart. Well, it's depreciated by now, but I mean, we had some kind of UI in Dart, written in Dart, which we could use the same logic which we have written in our state management purely in Dart into our application. But if I move context to a store, then it's very hard. Then you
Yep.
can't do that. If you can use, if it's just for Flutter, maybe it's absolutely fine, no problem, right?
Yep. Yep.
But I'm just thinking a little bit maybe ahead of time. Sometimes you want to use Dart for other purposes, not just for Flutter. Maybe we can use the similar, concept or
Yeah,
similar
absolutely.
logic.
Absolutely. I'm glad we did this show, so I have something interesting to work on.
Yeah, that's very good. So then, all right. I think now we can wrap it up. What we can do, I think so far about this idea of the context. So let's have a clear, a statement here, so people can do what you've done here. If you're doing purely probably Flutter, you can just create this method that Pavan did, and change to any things that you want in the reactions setting up in your app store, right? That's what we've done, passing the context
Hmm.
or the UI context to the store and then reacting based on something. That's one way of doing that. Another way is we may keep that into the home, still having the stateless and maybe initial state and init state function, and then react to state change inside the widget if you want to keep your store clean. Or the third is going to be a new feature by Pawan sometime soon in 2020. We don't know when, but
Yes,
hopefully he's
very
creating
soon.
some kind of listener for us as a widget that can react to something.
Yep, yep. It'll happen
And
very soon.
Very nice. So let's move on. And then for the last part of the show, maybe just go to profile. I think this is going to be simple now. So we're going to have this text, hello Majid. So we're going to change it with our, let's actually move on to here. We're going to just change the Majid name to our actual profile name, which we had, right?
Yep.
I think this is going to be simple. Let's see if I understood right now.
Sure.
Can I
sure.
just say here, login state, or it's not login state, it's us state, and then it's going to be, what was our object here name?
I think it's
coffee store.
Dot auth
Yeah.
dot,
So then it's
yeah.
something like that.
Yep. Dot login state. Yeah.
And then it's
Dot
going
log.
to be our user, actually. I want my user. Because
Yep.
at this point, I'm pretty sure if user is in profile, it's already logged in because the page is protected somehow. So then I have my auth, and then I can come back here. And then I can say, okay. So that's a mistake. So this is going to be value, right? Not the observable.
Yep.
So then I'm going to have login, and then I'm going to have the name. So in this case, and I think because name was null, no, it wasn't.
So auth state is actually a nullable value.
You mean it should be like
the user.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
So
it has changed.
So we could do some
Hello,
minor,
Pavan.
yeah, we could do some minor refactoring on this, right? So you could still go to the logout page during user testing and other kinds of, simulated testing, right? And you still want it to be protected. So the way you could do it is you could actually wrap just this text with an observer and then read the auth state over there and then re-render the text.
Okay, let's actually do that. Let's actually do that. So,
and I'll just say one more point before we go there.
Go ahead.
If you put the observer on the text instead of putting it on the top level column, then you're actually re-rendering a much larger portion of your widget tree.
I see.
Right? So if you put the observer just on this, only that particular widget will be re-rendered, which will give you performance benefits if you have a very large screen and all that.
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
So
then you say that I can say observer.
Yep.
Observer widget, and that's actually a builder.
Yeah. Yes. VR. Yep. And it takes a builder as a parameter.
And it has a builder, which is going to return this text, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And the builder is probably, here we go.
That's the context.
And then I don't need this here anymore, right? So I can
Exactly. Yeah, you'll have to just read the whole thing inside your builder method now. So it'll be coffee store dot auth dot the whole thing. Yeah.
Actually, I can use the whole thing here.
Yes.
Yep, all right. Perfect. So that means now this is going to change only this part, right?
Yep.
That's very nice. Okay, sounds good. So we kind of managed together like to have this app state, sharing state between screens. That is fine. My last question was because on the website, I've seen that you also kind of support code generation. A lot of people like these metaprogramming and, code generation and stuff as well. Mm-hmm. And I assume that it's probably very simple to kind of change this to a code generated approach, right? So both ways, as I understood right now, is possible. If I'm a big fan of code generation, probably I can go for it. If not, then I can just write whatever you provided from the package to me, like observable class, for example. But if I want to change it to a code generation approach, can I just rename this, like, for example, to this annotation style like that? Is it the way that it works?
To use CodeGen, you'll have to introduce an additional package, which is the MobX CodeGen package.
I see.
And you have to also set up the build runner along with it. And there's actually a nice article on the website which kind of walks you through that in a step-by-step process. So if you want code generator, you could add these annotations to your variables, and it gives you much cleaner looking code. and that way you could run the builder on the side in a watch mode, and then automatically regenerate the file every time.
I see. So, so the code generation, like the observable annotation, let's say in this case, it's going to create actually similar things, right? It's going to create this for me. It's not somehow a magic thing. It's just creating
Yeah.
same thing that we've done here, right?
Yes, it actually does more optimizations for you. So rather than
Really?
creating an observable, it actually creates something called as an atom, which is
I
probably the
see.
smallest conceptual piece in MobX, which is not exposed right now, right? So what it does is an atom is the one which is the tracker for your reactive state. It knows when a
Mhm.
state is being read, and it can also notify, when the state is being changed, right? So what we do
Mhm.
internally is we use an atom to keep track of the fact that you're using the observable, right? So that's an optimization we do so that we don't have to carry the extra baggage that observable has with it.
Oh, nice. So then your recommendation is, I just want to ask you, do you prefer it like to have this code generation or like the way that we've done right now?
So the reason I'm actually kind of moving away from code generation is because of metaprogramming, which will be introduced into Dart at some point, right? The Dart
Yep.
2.9, I don't know, 16, 17, at some point we'll have metaprogramming, which will give you a lot of compile time benefits, right? There's no need to run a builder on the side, right? It'll generate the code during compile time itself. So it'll give you the same aesthetics that you see right now with the annotations, just that you don't have to run the build runner on the side. And I'm advocating for that approach so that you don't carry the extra weight of a build runner as this extra step that you have to go through in order to generate this code. And also there are some complaints I received and some issues being filed that if your code base is pretty large, running into maybe hundreds of thousands of
Takes
lines,
time.
it'll take time.
Yeah.
And it could be an issue. So it's an issue partially with MobX and partially with the fact that the build runner cache is not smart enough to know, what to cache and what not to cache, right? So
Mhm.
there are some issues over there. But I think it has gotten better over time. But I have noticed that issue too, on my own projects. So I'm actually kind of moving away from code generation and just doing it in the raw way.
That's perfect. So then what we've done is kind of up to date. We need to
Yep,
continue this way. That's very
absolutely,
nice.
absolutely.
Do you want to add that or give us some kind of like latest tips and tricks or something that you are very big fan of, that feature in MobX or something in particular as the last words?
Yeah, so MobX had a new feature which was introduced, I think, a couple of months back called spying. And what you do with spying is that it will allow you to spy on all the changes that are happening inside MobX, right? And this way, whenever an action gets fired, whenever you mutate something through observables, whenever you fire a reaction, all of those things are actually logged on the console. So you can use it to kind of keep track of what's happening whenever you press a button or you switch between screens and so on. So that required a lot of changes to the internals of MobX because every function, every action, every reaction, and every place where the reactive system is getting activated had to be changed to update and use spying. So it was a pretty big change. It pretty much touched every single file in the code base. So that's the favorite feature of mine because it was the most complex change I had to do. The second best is the adoption of null safety, right? That also required a lot of changes across the entire code base. And probably one of the biggest changes in terms of commits that I've done to adopt null safety. And but yeah, those two are really fun to work with because you really had to dig through a lot of things to make it work.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Then I think last thing, if people wants to contribute, then what should they do, Pawan?
So one good place to start is look at the good for first issue. There's actually a label for that in my issues page. Um, and you can start by looking at those labels and seeing which issues are places where you can start contributing. The other thing is to just update the documentation also. There are a lot of places in the documentation where it's not comprehensive enough in terms of the understanding the mental models and things like that, right? So some people still have some issues around that. So you could start by updating documentation, which is not a code level change, but still good to kind of make sure it makes sense for a lot of the folks out there. And a lot of people actually have done that. They have created the Portuguese version, the Chinese version of the README pages, and they have created translations for it. which actually is a great way to understand the MobX as a package. And then you can dive deeper into the code and do more advanced things. In fact, that's how I started with MobX JavaScript too, right? I first contributed to documentation, and then I got more comfortable, and then I jumped straight into the code after that. So I would say start with documentation first, understand the lay of the land, and then you can dive into the code as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I know that there are a lot around MobX and things that we need to learn. We actually haven't implemented or used action object or class. We haven't used many other things around it, but I think we touched the most important things around the state management with MobX. That is perfect. And I hope that people who watched this or are going to watch this episode, they understand the base or the most fundamental things around MobX. I really liked it, to be honest. It's just very simple, easy, and makes the separation concerns, especially regarding app state and your UI state, very, very clean, which is very nice. Thank you so much,
Yep.
Pavan, for doing this great effort and contribution to Flutter community, having an amazing package, MobX, and please keep rocking. Come back to this show whenever you have something to say. We are very happy to have you. It's a pleasure to have you here in this show.
Cool.
Have a great day.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Majid, and it was fun, and also thanks for the tip on creating the listener widget.